What's up, everybody? Good afternoon, and we've got a little bit of Seahawks news here. Nothing big yet, nothing official yet, but I did find this to be somewhat notable on a couple different levels, so let's talk through it. Yesterday, there was a report that the Seahawks have interviewed with a former Las Vegas Raiders assistant for the position of quarterback coach. So, first of all, the interesting thing here off the jump is the fact that we're looking for a quarterback coach at all, because Ryan Grubb has been the quarterback coach his last couple of coaching stops. So my initial thought was that Grubb was just going to be the OC slash QB coach, but we look like we have other plans. So certainly not against that, certainly nothing wrong with that. Maybe it's even better to have another person handle that responsibility, but my initial guess was that Grubb might take that role too. So, who are we looking at for QB coach? The name that has come up is Fred Walker. Not a big name in the coaching ranks of the NFL or coaching ranks of any level of football, but this is how the coaching machine churns. You have guys work their way up. They work their way up through college a lot of the time. They work their way up as assistants. Then they get a position coach job. Then they become coordinators. Then they might become a head coach. So this guy's trying to churn his way up to the top. And the Seahawks are thinking about making him their quarterback coach to help him get to that next level. So Fred Walker has spent a little bit of time in the NFL. I threw together a quick little resume here, not too detailed or anything. I just wanted to take a look at where he's been so far in his career to get an idea of the kinds of things that he's touched. He's been in the NFL for 2 years. He's been an offensive assistant for the Raiders last 2 seasons with a focus supposedly on the quarterbacks. That seems to be where he usually goes to try to help these teams. So I guess that makes sense given the fact that you're thinking about hiring him as a quarterback coach. But as an offensive assistant on the Raiders, it's not great because the Raiders' offense, I mean, we saw what happened last year. Now, 2 years ago, their offense was decent. Their offense was like 12th in the league in scoring. So not bad, I guess. Not the worst anyway. So that's the extent of his NFL experience so far. Really, what this guy has brought to the table that's interesting is the stuff he did in college football. And I want to run this down here because that's kind of where he's made his name. And it's not a big name yet, but there is some stuff here that is pretty impressive. So let's work backwards like we always do through this guy's career so far. Spent a year with Massachusetts, the Minutemen. Great team name, by the way. Quarterback coach for 1 year, so he does have experience as a straight-up quarterback coach. And he also spent a year as the wide receiver coach on the Murray State Racers. I don't have a lot of information about these two stints. Obviously, they only lasted 1 year anyway, and they're very small schools in the grand scheme of things. Like, Massachusetts, on average, will produce like 1 or 2 drafted players a year. They're that kind of school. And Murray State, I'd never even heard of until I was putting together information for this video. So I don't have much to say there, but those were his previous 2 stops. The stop where he actually did something of note was Duke. He was an offensive assistant for the Duke Blue Devils for 2 years, 2018-2019, with a leaning towards quarterbacks. So he was an offensive assistant, but he mostly worked with the quarterbacks. And the Duke quarterback during part of his tenure there was, of course, Daniel Jones. And Daniel Jones, who admittedly is a very talented individual, somebody who brings a lot of positive traits to the position in terms of like size, arm strength, mobility, etc., and just seems to struggle a little bit between the ears. They got good things out of him. I mean, he was a 2-time team MVP. He worked his way up to being a top 10 pick, almost top 5 pick in the draft, and was, I would say, a positive net impact on that Duke program. I mean, what else can you really say about it when you go 6th overall coming from a school like Duke? Now, of course, Cutcliffe probably had more to do with Daniel Jones's hype than anything that Fred Walker did, but hey, if you're going to give him credit for working with Daniel Jones at Duke, that's pretty good. Because we've seen that Daniel Jones in the NFL, not a super toolsy, well, I guess he is toolsy, but he's not exactly a prototype in the sense of being able to play at the NFL level. So getting as much good production as they did out of Daniel Jones at Duke is pretty good. All right, so before then, he spent a year at Tennessee Tech with the Golden Eagles as a wide receiver coach. He actually had one really good receiver this during this year. I can't remember the guy's name, but he had like over 1,000 yards, which is notable on a team like the Golden Eagles, and made some first team all conference teams. So pretty good year, but that's not really what we're focusing on if he's going to be the quarterback coach, right? That's not something that's overly interesting to us. He spent 2 years as a graduate assistant on the Troy Trojans, so a lot of smaller schools here, admittedly, right? Like Duke is by far the biggest school in terms of football, anyway, of the teams that we've looked at so far, but that's because we haven't gotten to his best mark yet. So from 2013 to 2015, he was the offensive assistant, again, mostly working with quarterbacks, on the Mississippi State Bulldogs. And Mississippi State, that's a big school. That's a significant school. That's a school that matters. They don't matter like Alabama. They don't matter like Georgia, but they matter. And Mississippi State's main quarterback during this run, this 3-year run where Fred Walker was their offensive assistant, was Dak Prescott. And Dak Prescott had a great career at Mississippi State. Was a great dual threat quarterback, threw for a lot of yards, had this one season, I think it was 2014, where he looked remarkable. And there was a point in time where Mississippi State was ranked #1 in the country, mostly because of the play of Dak Prescott. And there was a point in time where Dak Prescott was being looked at as a potential future first-round pick, maybe even a top 10 pick. And then he fell off a little bit his last year. Some of the limitations became more evident, and he slipped. But he still ended up being a fourth-round pick. A fourth-round pick is not nothing, and he went on to be a very successful NFL quarterback. So the work that Fred Walker did with Dak Prescott is still probably the most impressive thing he's done. But when you take a look at his role in developing those two fairly prolific NFL players, and say whatever you want to about Daniel Jones and even Dak Prescott, both those guys have made generational money in the NFL as starting quarterbacks. And both of them were prolific college quarterbacks. Sorry if you can hear my dog. But I'd say this is a pretty impressive stint for him. A 3-year offensive assistant leaning towards quarterbacks, helping Dak Prescott develop to the point where he would eventually become a starter in the NFL. Before then, he was an offensive assistant for 2 years with a wide receiver leaning, mostly working with the receivers, 2011, 2012. So he did dabble a little bit in the wide receiver part of things, but it seems like, generally speaking, he prefers to work with quarterbacks, and we should probably view him through that lens, which is, of course, good. So now he looks like he's got a decent chance of being the Seahawks quarterback coach. We are taking our time with these decisions, but I don't think we need to cast some giant net to get a quarterback coach in here. Now, one thing that I would say about this, because I don't mind this is fine. Quarterback coach under a guy like a Ryan Grubb, working behind a guy like a Scott Huff, like it's not something that I'm placing the highest priority on. I would like somebody at some point on this staff to have legitimate NFL experience. It doesn't have to be the quarterback coach, but if it could be the quarterback coach, maybe it'll be the passing game coordinator, whoever it is. I want somebody in that chain with NFL experience. Because as of right now, we're going for broke with this coaching staff. We really are. And that starts at the top with Mike Macdonald, who's never been an NFL head coach before, never been even a college head coach. And then you've got Ryan Grubb, who's never been an offensive coordinator or coach, period, in the NFL. Scott Huff has never coached in the NFL. He's always been a college guy. Not that I'm worried about that, but at some point, I want a guy to kind of provide a sober yin to the raging yang of these coaches we're bringing in that are dice rolls. And this guy would not really be it because he's only got the 2 years as an offensive assistant. So at some point during this process, and it doesn't have to be here, I want to be very firm about that. At some point, I'd like at least one coach in this chain of command with serious, legitimate, good NFL coaching results. A passing game coordinator would be ideal, but QB coach could be it too. I just don't want a whole staff made up of guys who are unproven, unclear, never done this before. Just give me something. Somebody to offset things a little bit back towards the stable. So, just something to think about. Again, this is how the process works, right? Guys work their way up, and often in order to start, they have to go to these smaller colleges. They have to take smaller roles. They have to go to college where there are way more teams. So I get it. I just would like one person in the room that is deeply experienced on the offensive side of NFL coaching. All right. Let me know what you guys think, if anything. I know that Fred Walker's not exactly somebody who's a household name, but yeah, again, not against it. There's some good stuff here. Mostly when he's gone to a major program like Duke or Mississippi State, as much if you can call those major programs, he's done things that are positive. And even his work in Las Vegas, I mean, what are you going to do when your quarterbacks are Jimmy Garoppolo and Aiden O'Connell? You're not going to have a lot of success. All right. See you guys later. Go Hawks. Let me know what you think.